Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's Better Managers Briefing on a Friday before a bank holiday, and it's sunny. How nice is that? So at these broadcasts, we explore the management and leadership issues that matter to you in this moment. And today, I'm really delighted to have two companions. They're both former colleagues of mine. One is Fiona Dawson, who is the global president of Mars Food and multi-sales, and also Steve Axe, who is the chief marketing officer for Nomad Food. So they are both in the food business, and as we know, the food producers and supply chains have been running flat out to keep the world fed. So we're going to be exploring some of those particular challenges. So welcome first, both of you, to Steve and Fiona. Lovely to see you. So our first question is the obvious one. You've been managing frontline workers in factories, in logistics and warehouses. That's a very different challenge, and they've been working really hard. Can you share with us some of the ways in which that has presented a challenge and how it differs perhaps from managing remote teams? And maybe Fiona, start with you.
Sure, of course. Thank you, Anne. It's really great to be here. The challenges has been enormous. So, just to give you some set of context, what we are currently producing is like 10 times what we had forecasted we would produce for this particular period. So first of all, you're dealing with unprecedented levels of demand in the system. And that is also exacerbated by the fact of social distancing in factories. Yeah. So the first thing we've had to do across the globe is introduce social distancing practices in all of our factories, irrespective of where they were in lockdown, and then simplify the range down really to the core selling blockbuster SKUs so that we could manage our throughput more effectively. So actually the crisis period, I don't say it was easy. It was very complicated to get there. But because we run a much simpler range now, actually what's going to be challenging for us is when we ramp up. Yeah. And we start to introduce more of our range back into the system. And how do we manage the complexity while still honoring social distancing? We're going to have social distancing until the foreseeable future. We're not going to go back and ease that up, even if countries, say it's okay.
Sure. And what about some of the differences between managing those people in the factories and other places as opposed to the remote workers working from home? What are some of the challenges for on-site?
Well, I think we've been really blessed in the sense of being categorized so early on as essential key workers gave a huge sense of pride. We clearly have been talking a lot around recognition and recognizing those factory associates on site, either financially or where we can virtually via email, etc. But they are exhausted. They've been working under huge pressure. But equally, what we see with home workers, I think people think or thought that home working was some kind of holiday. How many of us have been stuck at our screens, not 24/7, but whilst the sun is shining outside, and particularly those with young kids who are homeschooling as well as home working. So we see very different stresses and strains coming through. A lot of focus being put on mental health, both for our factory workers, our field workers. We've got a lot of people out there in the field, and also on home workers as well.
So, Steve, what do you see as some of the challenges in keeping your factories moving, and how does that differ from managing the office workers?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Fiona, frozen food has seen a huge increase in sales. So not only are managing social distancing and all the challenges, but also a huge spike in demand. So very similar, simplifying the range to help them. I think that the key differences around are, first of all, recognizing that they are our frontline workers, so a huge amount of recognition and pride in everybody to the factory. That they're our number one concern. And then we've got a big factory in Italy, and obviously Italy was first, so we took kind of the measures that we took in Italy across to the whole group straight away. So we put in thermostats at the big factory entrances. We banned anybody who wasn't a frontline worker going to a factory, for example, so they were cut off. And then invested very heavily, very early in PPE equipment. Managed to get in there early. So the masks and the sanitizers. Social distancing is key, lots of education. We've even slowed the lines down to mean that people can be further apart. Fiona's done the same by the looks of things. So yeah, thinking differently, we can get the guys to think about how can they support social distancing beyond obviously in the canteens and some of the obvious things, on the line, how can we get people further apart?
And what about some of the differences for you between managing those in factories versus those who are now perhaps in offices working remotely?
I think, overall, I think the working from home thing is generally seen as positive. We've done a survey, and we've of 1,200 employees have given us some feedback on that, which has been great. So listening to them, it sounds like that they enjoy the flexibility, but there are challenges, and it's different by age group and family circumstance. We saw the 25 to 45-year-old group was having the toughest time, either because that's the group that tends to potentially be single, and therefore, certainly in the beginning when lockdown was very tight, very alone, or with young children, and I think young children running around with two spouses working, I think it's proved a big challenge and very stressful. Either end of the spectrum, I think it is working okay. And we've supported that, and the technology, I must admit, hands out to people like WebEx and Zoom and Microsoft Teams. They've been a godsend. They've really worked.
Yeah, that's very true. And, it's interesting. We did a survey, and I did this last week with Lord Mark Price, that also found that people were generally happier working from home. But so what advice, we've got a lot of businesses opening up now in the UK and in other countries. What advice would you give to those organizations who are just starting to bring their people back on site? What would you counsel them, particularly the managers and leaders? Maybe Fiona, start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's just a capacity issue here. We've reckoned we look globally at red, green, yellow and green zones. And very few markets are green at the moment. Some are yellow, and the UK would be red. So we wouldn't contemplate opening up our UK market, for instance, but we are in Austria. And when we look at the capacity, people think that, I think they intuitively know it won't be the same, but they want it to be the same. And actually, we can only have, in the beginning, 10 to maximum 20% of our associates on site, and maintain social distancing and all the good practices we want to put in place. And, we're an open office culture. We don't have separate office spaces. We're used to interacting and hot desking. So that way of work, we're trying to really set the scene for people to say it is going to be different. The other thing I think is setting the tone from the top is incredibly important. We have vulnerable people who will still be shielding. We will have people who are very scared about going in. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you'll have leaders who go, I want to lead from the top, I want to be in. And if you're the boss and people feel they have to be in there, that's a real challenge. So giving optionality to people, come in if you feel comfortable, don't come in if you don't feel comfortable, using public transport, all of the other points that we've made. That is really important as people deal with this crisis in their own very personal way, actually.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Steve, what about you? What advice would you give to people?
Yeah, that's been very, very similar to Fiona. I think listen to the employees' concerns. I think that's what we did, and hear the different employee concerns, and you can see very clearly that there are very different perspectives. Some people can't wait to get back and be there. Some people are saying, well, I've got older relatives, or I'm a carer, I've got young children. So I think personal circumstance and listening to people is the most important, and then recognizing that we're going to have to be flexible, because you can't force people into a situation on their personal health. That's just not it's not the type of business, at Mars or Nomad is. So that's just not, got to really listen to people.
Listening to people is a really important thing. I'm sorry, we seem to have a little bit of echoing. Hopefully that will die down. Now, you've both mentioned that you are in global businesses. You've referenced, Fiona, your traffic light system. And how do you see the challenges of managing this pandemic globally, given that, as you rightly said, different places in the world are at different stages? Maybe Steve, you can take that one first.
Yeah. So we've tried to have we do have group protocols. At the group level, we want to set a framework, and we've consistently tried to almost be ahead of any government guidelines. And with the benefit of having a global business, you can see ahead, and then therefore you can reflect and hopefully preempt with the situation in any one particular market. So we have global protocols, but then we very much lead it to the local leadership teams and for their operational, how to operationalize that, in their own situation, particularly as government guidelines change so fast and so quickly. But I think we try to manage it in a framework, And so particularly for factories, so everybody feels like they're being treated fairly and consistently, and everybody's got a fair voice. Whether you're in Italy or in Norway, the situation, as far as we're concerned, is the same. Your well-being is our number one concern.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Fiona, what about you?
Yeah, we would also have global guidelines. I think this tone from the top is really important, and setting people's expectations. So very early on, we said, for instance, no international travel for business until the end of the year. Now, we could have said for the foreseeable future, but giving certainty to people in very uncertain times has been really important. So we guaranteed pay up until the end of June, when hopefully restrictions will be lifted. No international travel, no opening up offices until we are absolutely confident and it moves into the green zone. So that has, if you like, given permission for people to take some bold decisions. And like Steve, we do that then at the local level, but we have a governing body that will look at these decisions just to make sure that it's in track. I think one thing I've really noticed has been the context of the market has sometimes driven slightly different decision making. So for instance, in India, my factory in India, in Pune, it's been really hard to get social distancing. So we've had to, move to one shift. Now we've got a second shift. The other place would have been in the US, where there's very conflicting information. And we actually had to go to the mayor in the site we're in Mississippi to say, please, will you reinforce this message through the communities that they shouldn't be getting together? Because if you're hearing that message outside of it's okay, it's not us, it's someone else, then it's very difficult for people to adopt that behavior. So working with your local communities as well as your local management teams has been really a definer for us.
That's a really important point, and maybe we'll come back to that a bit later. But working together at a local level, not just as a business organization, but with community leadership, I think is going to be very important across the board. Now, you've both said that you're managing mixed situations, and Fiona, you said you can't bring everybody back on site to offices. You may have 10 to 20% there. And obviously, we're going to have a combination of people on site and still remote, and that's going to be a challenge, as well as the people working on the front line. What are your thoughts about how best to approach that, Steve?
Yeah, we've tried to, when we're currently doing that, identify who is mission critical to come back to the office. I mean, they have to be there, whether it's technology, particular technology is an issue, and where those team scenarios need to play out. So we need to make sure those guys are prioritized first. And then I know, can you not work from home? Maybe you haven't got Wi-Fi, maybe you've got too many people in the house and you physically can't concentrate and do your job. So again, making it very personal to people, what's your personal circumstance to be able to do your job, and then flex it accordingly. We're already talking about how do the office will change. The question is to what, but the office environment will definitely change. Whether it becomes more of a meeting hub, with just essential people who need to be there, that might be one way. Or do we all go to work 2 to 3 days a week and we flex it? And that also help the similar issue that Fiona's got, 10 to 20% of people at any one time. So I think we do recognize that people have embraced and we've proven that we can be flexible. So we don't all need to be locked into 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. That will, I don't think, ever come back. What it will become, we need to work through. We need to work through.
Sure. Fiona, what are your thoughts on managing that mix?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the classic, creating, teams of people who will be in at the same time. The other thing that we're focused on, you mentioned about different groups reacting in different ways. We have our global headquarters in London, in Paddington. You've been there, Anne. And we have a lot of our associates who would be single, but from other countries. So very dislocated from friends and family. And we're very conscious of them. We would like to bring some of those back in earlier, for instance, than those who can maybe work from home. And the other area that I think we're at this stage, it will be relatively easy because of the 10 to 20. What we believe, and I've seen some research from the WBC members, that once we hit more than 50% in an office, people will feel they should be there. So actually, I think in this cautionary opening up stage, it will be very, very managed. And then as restrictions get alleviated, that's when some of the challenges could really happen.
Oh,
That's an interesting point. I wasn't aware of that research about the 50% threshold, and we will come back to that. It's a very interesting point. And maybe it'll pop up in my next question, which is, you've both alluded to, you think that the office world and indeed the working world, office, factory, supply chain, will change. How do you think it will change? What are some of your thoughts, and what are some of your predictions? And are there silver linings in there? Who'd like to start us off with that?
Ladies first.
Oh my gosh, there have been so many highlights. We've just had a global food leadership team meeting this week, a 3-day meeting covering time zones from Australia through to Chicago. And it was without doubt the best meeting we had. It was more disciplined. It was more efficient. Everyone got to speak. We used the chat box really effectively. We also instigated in the very beginning town halls with all of our associates. And we do it very similar format, no PowerPoint slides, no presentations, just chatting about what was happening. And everyone loves it so much, they want us to keep it. And I'm finding there's a much greater deal of spontaneity, people feeling they have to be less formal, pre-reads and all the nonsense work that we have in the system and the glue of managers then checking something else. So I really hope we keep that sense of informality, spontaneity, and efficiency as we go forward.
Yeah, and what you're really saying is we've become more human, right? And maybe the mere fact that we see each other in situations like this, although I have my trusty CMI branded scheme behind me, but I can see what your home looks like and your office looks like, and kids and pets wandering in and out. Anyway, Steve, what are some of the things you think will change?
Yeah, but I think one of the things we're seeing is also that you can manage big meetings far more effectively than potentially you can when they're physically in the room, because there is that discipline. I think we're also finding that you can tap into subject matter experts much more easily, because they can just be in the background and then they can add their value. So I think actually we're getting higher quality output of our discussions, because we haven't just got the senior people in the room. We can get the right people in the room for the right conversations, and that's been a real breakthrough. And the technology, again, I think we've done some workshops, we've done global meetings, town halls, even some creativity sessions with the agency. You can do with some of the technology now. So I think I would never have thought you have to have a human contact, but in reality, this has proven that we're far more adaptive than we think, and we're far more human than we think, because I've seen so many people's living rooms and cats and pets and dogs and kids. There's human. You've got senior leaders with babies on their laps, trying to hold a meeting, and it's normal, and you laugh, and there's informality, and they're human, and you see we're all in this together, rather than a name and a title. So yeah, that's a real breakthrough.
That is a great thing. And do you see, because I mentioned this in a comment interview I was giving, that actually we might see a decline in office politics a little bit because of some of these things?
I hope so. I really hope so. I think politics creep in irrespective of it. So I would like to think so. I think what it's given is a great degree of empathy towards people who have done home working in the past and flexible working. And I think that is now, people will realize that actually you can be incredibly effective. That idea of presenteeism, we all know that. I think that is blown out of the water. But politics, I don't know.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think there's hopefully the more obvious politics will probably hopefully disappear. The hanging around the boss's door, waiting for him to go and grab a coffee, just to bump into him, or when he does go for a coffee, then you want yours. So the more obvious, bumping in will probably disappear. But I don't think it'll disappear. I'm sure they'll invent other ways of doing it somehow, more virtually.
There you go. Well, now, Fiona, you mentioned the WBC, which is the Women's Business Council. Now, you chair that. That's a UK body that does so much for a cause that we're both very passionate about, which is gender equality and gender balance. Can you comment? What has this crisis done for gender balance, for that issue? Can you give us some examples and thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we cover a number of different industries. So basically, it's an industry-led, government-backed body. So we're backed by government and GEO. And we cover industries including construction, retail, finance. So very, very varied. Interestingly, flexible working was one of our strategic areas that we were working on. The other area that we were working on was of culture, and I'm going to use gender in a quite stereotypical way, but sort of macho culture in office places, or indeed, if I look at construction sites, on construction sites as well. That was felt to be very intimidating. And we've seen a real leveler in that, a more respectful culture over the last 12 weeks. If I look at the construction sector, the head of the business association there shared with me that she's seeing the fact that social distancing is in place and people can have their own washing facilities and toilet facilities. That wasn't the case. It often had been one cubicle, for instance, irrespective of gender. So we've seen very, very interesting dynamics coming through. And clearly we've talked about flexible working and how that taboo of flexible working is unproductive actually has shifted for a number of senior leaders. And I really hope that stays.
Sure, it's an excellent point, and I think a lot of people hope it stays, and some companies are coming out and saying, yeah, they're going to embed it in their culture forevermore. Steve, you're Chief Marketing Officer, so obviously an expert on how to talk with consumers. Have you changed your approach to how you do that, how you engage with your customers during this crisis?
Yeah, I think we took a stance, and I took a stance quite early, that when it was a very acute stage, when people are really scared, when it right at the very beginning, was be helpful or be quiet. So we decided to be helpful. So we pulled our standard advertising, and we generated a campaign that was really supporting families, because we're a family brand. Bird's Eye is a family brand, with lots of activities and support for children and families and recipes. It was genuinely not about selling stuff. And it was also, we took the approach to be slightly lighthearted, because we felt that people needed a bit of a lift. But Bird's Eye is a brand that's a family brand with a bit of a lift. So let's encourage people, let's support people, but help people. That was our immediate response. And then I think in the more midterm is don't go dark. You can't afford to go dark. Brands are part of people's lives. Forget the econometrics, and we know from data that your brand will, if you go dark for too long, it will hurt your brand in the long term. Brands like the Mars portfolio or our portfolio are part and parcel of daily life. They're part of culture. So to pull them away from people, that we felt that was inappropriate. So, and also we're in a category that's going through the roof. Right. So I want to make sure, I want to encourage that. We offer great products, healthy products, and that can also help in the environment where you don't want to go to the supermarket every day. Frozen food also benefits. So from a category perspective, it made sense. But those are the two principles: be helpful or be quiet, and then just don't go dark.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Could I just add to that? I mean, I think the really interesting thing has been we've turned around some phenomenal content in a very quick amount of time, short amount of time, should I say? So I think challenging the old model of how we create content. With big meetings and everyone needing to be on site and it taking 6 months to get to production. I mean, we've just proven we can do some really great stuff very, very quickly. So talking to our agencies and our partners about how we embed that going forward, it will also be important.
Yeah, I mean, so building on that, Fiona, I should reach out to our partners as well. We were 14 days from brief to being on air with TV and digital on 13 markets across Europe with a pan-European campaign. 14 days.
So ripping up the old rule book and driving innovation and just getting things done faster in a more human fashion. So I think you've both shared some really wonderful insights. But I now want to throw it open to the audience. If you want to ask a question, just type it in the box underneath your YouTube screen. And the first one is from Angelo, who says, how are you taking steps to recognize your frontline workers for the commitment in going to work in such challenging and potentially risky times? Maybe Fiona, start with you and move to Steve.
Sure. So we've done financial recognition in terms of bonuses for all of our factory workers, and physical recognition. So whilst we're not on site, we've made sure that we've recorded videos, we've sent them handwritten messages rather than a big campaign. But I would also say that we wanted to make sure there was no risk involved. So creating the safest environment, Steve mentioned some of those things, temperature checking, hand sanitizers, everyone should feel safe. And we've been doing some pulse surveys with our associates to make sure they do absolutely feel safe when they walk into one of our factories. And that's been the most important thing.
Thank you. I'm muting to help with the feedback issue. So Steve, what kind of measures have you taken?
I mean, very similar. So financial reward, reassuring people with bonuses to recognize their contribution way ahead of what would be the normal timeliness of that. And then the personal and recognition and the pride from everybody else to make that very visible. So across the organization, so not just the boss recognizing, in our videos, but also, notes from the counterparts in their local office, much more of the human recognition from everybody rather than just being a corporate group response. So recognition, engagement, lots of town halls, and then we've been trying to replicate that as best we can in a factory and making sure they have access to some of the technology that wouldn't normally be in a factory. So again, trying to flex and make the most of the virtual working that we're doing to allow that purely for recognition and connection. So both.
Great. So here's a question from Peter. A lot of people working from home are suffering from mental health issues, isolation, struggling with family. It is actually Mental Health Week this week. Typically, they don't speak up. How do you support them? Who'd like to take that?
I go first. So at a group level, we send out weekly communication around helping people. We've established seminars, online seminars for mental health and well-being that go out and that people can dial into and record. We've also put on our online training management system modules around working from home to support people in mental health and mental well-being. So there's a lot of training and education that we've pushed out, to help people, and then we're also trying to encourage line managers to be human as well. So to really connect and listen to their teams, lots of one-on-ones, Friday drinks at 5 o'clock just to connect and be human. We've also doing walk and talks now, where we're trying to, as we progress out of lockdown, encouraging people not to just do the WebEx, but take a phone call and also pick somebody to just talk to. So we're also encouraging that. So I had a walk and talk with somebody I talk to pretty much every day, but not about work. So along the river in London, this is where I walk every day. So we were trying to get people to not just be about work and to get away from the screen. I think it's
sure. And to your point, I went earlier this week for a picnic in Richmond Park on a very sunny day with my phone, and I did a walk and talk. Fiona, how are you managing mental health?
I mean, it's a really critical issue, isn't it? Because I think, as the question rightly says, a lot of the people who need help don't speak up. So as well as a lot of the initiatives Steve is talking to, and access to online facilities in terms of whether it's training on mental health issues, etc. But what if those people don't pick it up? I think as managers, it is so important we keep our antenna out. Have you heard from somebody recently? Where are they? Have they gone quiet on you? Are they on their own? Is this a particular time? So we had, coming up to, obviously we have Eid, for we had Passover, we had some critical family times when people would be together, that we really looked out for our associates and encouraged people to talk to someone that they haven't spoken to in at least a week. And whilst we are all in this together, everyone's experience has been different. And talking about your own experience and being honest with the fact that whilst, yes, in general, it's been great and we can work from home, we've all hit walls. All hit walls. That lack of certainty of the future, the inability to plan, you really are looking forward going, well, when am I going to be able to travel? When am I going to be able to do, to see my family again? And sharing that, somebody that they think may have it all buttoned up actually is finding it hard as well, I think is really important.
That is a key point. So as a leader, showing your own vulnerability. So here's a question from James. What are your thoughts on the balance between bringing people back from furlough versus getting people back into sales teams, for example, to build pipeline and time to capitalize on the market when it reappears? So it's really about the balance of bringing people back too soon and seeing things like motivation drop or costs increasing if maybe sales don't return as quickly and you're not in a boom market as both of you are. So how would you balance that out? Maybe Steve, start with you.
Yeah, as you say, we're in the very fortunate position of not being in that furlough situation. So, but from my personal perspective, I think, we need to get back to normal as soon as possible. And I think that there's the health issue, there's personal opinion, there's the health issue, but there's also the economic issue. So I think the quicker we can get people back to work and we can get the economy moving, it's going to be beneficial to everybody. But again, as we said at the very beginning, the number one concern has to be people's safety. So if you do bring people back, make sure you learn from the businesses that have been in the front line, like this call, to make sure you've got social distancing, you've got the protection, you've got the education. You adapt your procedures and your processes to allow people to be further apart. So just making sure, personal safety is the number one concern. And then if you can do that, get people back as soon as possible.
Great answer. Now I'm going to turn to our last question. I'm going to ask both of you this. It's from Jacinta, and she's saying, what's the most innovative development that you've seen in your organization, or another one if it's not your own, but I'm sure you'll find one in your own, in response to the challenges of COVID-19? So maybe start with Fiona on that.
So there are so many. I think it's the speed.
You can do more than one.
It's the speed. It's the speed at which we've changed our processes. It will often take us a long time to roll out a new technology, get people up and running. People have really embraced the new ways of working. And I'm going to do a second one. It's been the elevation of purpose. And true purpose, not greenwashing purpose, but actually people really understanding the communities in which they interact with and being very empathetic to that as well.
Those are great examples. And Steve, what about for you?
Yes, but one very close to home, we touched on it earlier, would be the kind of operating model with our agencies and even internally around alignment. How quickly if we put our minds to it, we can do great things. Advertising campaigns don't need to take 9 months, which is the norm. They can take 14 days. So I think the speed and agility of the marketing is one. I think the other one for me would be around how we have readapted, realized what's really important, and the importance of the employees, and just reinforce that, as the core of what we're about. Without the employees, you're nothing. So making sure whether that's personal safety, engagement, mental well-being, that's the core of everything that we do. Everything else will flow from there. So putting people at the front and center of what we do every day has also been something that I've been really proud of.
Isn't it interesting? We've often talked about people are our greatest asset, and what you're both saying is actually that's come into the reality as part of the silver lining of this crisis. Well, it's been absolutely amazing to have you both. I'm so glad that you were so helpful and not quiet. And of course, you've shed a lot of light. So you definitely, neither one of you has gone dark. And it's been a delight. It's been a great privilege to chat with you both, full of practical advice and examples, and I hope inspiring for everybody. So with that, have a great bank holiday weekend, everybody. We'll be back next Friday when we're going to explore the impact of COVID on diversity and inclusion with a couple of experts there. So I'll look forward to seeing you then. And meanwhile, stay safe and enjoy the sunshine. And thanks again to Fiona and Steve.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.